Welcome to the Cricket Matters podcast, the podcast for cricketers who want to train smarter and perform better. My name is James Breeze, co-host of the show, and sadly flying solo today because unfortunately Josh has had to go to hospital with his little boy Henry. So our thoughts and the feelings are with him and those guys, and hope they get better very, very soon. But we have a very exciting guest here today, a remarkable guest, I think, in fact, who's joining us, a man who's not only excelled in his chosen sport, but also made a significant impact in the world of philanthropy. He's a former English Test cricketer, an absolute legend of the Welsh game, or the game in general, actually, with an incredible career that has seen him represent his country, captain Glamorgan County Cricket Club, and even earn the prestigious title of Member of the Order of the British Empire. But that's not all. This remarkable man has also dedicated his time and efforts to raising awareness and funds for various charities and causes close to his heart. Please give a warm welcome to the talented, inspiring, and all-round great guy, Mr. Matt Maynard, MBE. Matt, how are you doing today?
Thanks very much, Breezy. Lovely intro. Yeah, I'm all is well, thanks.
Well, mate, it's all downhill from now here, though, so I do apologise. So it's how it is. So as always, with every guest that comes onto the show, we always start off with this one question, and that is, why does cricket matter to you, mate? Why does cricket matter to you?
I guess it was in my blood, from a young age. My dad used to play. Me and my brother would travel around various grounds watching Dad. Well, not so much watching Dad, playing a game the other side of the boundary between ourselves. And as brothers do have generally arguments and stuff. Charlie's still playing actually for some Fagans. He loves it, plays for the thirds, digs his whites out. Not same size as he used to be, but he still loves it. And it was just in the blood, I guess, from a young age, and it stayed with us.
Nice, that's awesome. Well, it's funny how we got connected because I think there's a good, very close mutual friend of ours, Michael Cann, who's also appeared in this podcast at one point. We brought us together. So a big shout out to Canny for making this happen. And also it's great speaking to you about all the work you're doing and all the training you're doing at the moment for an upcoming charity walk that you're doing later this year. And I will get to that later in the podcast. But but big shout out to Canny first of all. And please, like I said, off air as well, if there's any way to stitch Canny up, please feel free to do so. That would make my day, and I'll feel the same about doing the same to him as well.
Canny stitches himself up half the time, doesn't he? For stuff that he comes out with. So it's his own worst enemy half the time. But it's been brilliant having him back actually in South Wales. He's an incredibly passionate guy, and when he does come back, he tends to make things happen, whether that's on a club level or, what he's doing now with walking through the valleys for young cricketers, I think is magical, and raising some good funds for the clubs in the valleys, as well as Cardiff Cricket Club to, help junior sections thrive. So it's been a great kind of initiative by him to take on that responsibility, and, it was a real good one. The second one this year went really well and really well supported. So he does a huge amount of good, Canny, and he's always been a little bit mad. His genius stroke madness, and they say one stroke away from being mad when you're a genius, and he is a genius. But a great bloke and very passionate, and hopefully Canny and Mrs. Cann will join me in October. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I hope so. It is true. It has this enthusiasm for life, which is absolutely fantastic. It's funny because me and Canny started playing again at the same time again for Cardiff a few years ago. So he's been like a bit part of my evolution back into cricket as well, which has been
very
Cool.
infectious.
So, so hats off to Canny.
He's an infectious
that's a great word.
character. You just kind of bang, and it is. He just strikes relationships so well. He's just so easy to get on with, and he's a funny man. He's a very funny man. He used to do some things on the cricket field that you just met. We played actually. I think it was my second 11 game for Glamorgan. We were up at Usk, playing in Usk. And we had a guy called Steve Henderson, and Hendo used to enjoy a bit of a prank. And Canny was at mid-off on this pretty cold day. And Hendo was throwing these balls miles into the air for Canny to catch. And he used to catch like that, Canny, with his hands as narrow as possible. And anyway, he said, Canny, shouted Canny, and Canny would catch it and stuff. Anyway, a couple of times he shouted Canny, but didn't throw the ball up. And so Canny was looking, and obviously no ball there and stuff. Did him, we're all laughing and stuff. Anyway, he threw it up this one time, shouted Canny. Canny obviously didn't think anything was going to happen. Hit him on the head, had to go off to hospital for an x-ray. So he's gone off to hospital for an x-ray. They found a lead pellet in his cheek. where he got shot as a kid, 6-year-old.
Oh,
He
no
said, I
way.
thought he only grazed me, and it was still in his cheek. That's unbelievable. Yeah, so it's only canny. It only happened to canny.
That's brilliant. I'm going to ask him. I'll see him this weekend. I'll
Yeah.
definitely ask him
Ask
about
him
that as
about his
well.
pellet.
Is it? His pellet,
Yeah.
I will do. God, it's funny how everyone has different stories about different people all the time in doing this. It's pretty cool. But I genuinely hope he does make it, and we'll try our best to train him up to get him out there to do part of the leg with you on the
Well, on
walk
his,
at the end of the
just
eighth.
another one, because that's obviously, but he actually got Desmond Haynes out at Abergavenny once. But we couldn't
Did he?
catch him to celebrate with him. He was off round Abergavenny, celebrate. He later did a full loop, basically all the way around the boundary. Yeah, got him. Finger in the air and stuff. It's absolute jaffer. Absolute jaffer.
But it's funny though because he just did that in South Africa as well for the Wales over 50s. Like he took a wicket and literally he was off the fastest I've ever seen him run. He was like running around.
Yeah.
He's like Imran Tahir running around the
Yeah.
boundary as
Exactly.
he was doing it.
I think Tahir must be going from canny, to be honest.
I agree. I'm definitely going to coin that as well. So that's awesome. But good old Canny. We'll leave it at that. But Matt, I think we're going to go through three different phases of this this interview here today. I think we're going to talk about first of all as you as the player, because I think it's really important to get your insight from your experience back in the days, and then transition to your life as a coach, and then we'll go on to the charity work after. So nice and easy to begin with. So obviously you've had an incredible cricket career spanning 2 decades, playing for both England and Glamorgan. What would you say was one of the most memorable moments of your career that really stands out in your memory?
I guess there are a few. Probably so. What probably isn't known is that prior to Glamorgan, I actually trialled at Kent. So I was down there trialling for 2.5 years. Never got offered a contract, but I was trying. And then in the third year I was down there, we were playing, and I ended up batting 6 and 7 because they had first team guys who were back in. They'd signed a couple of players up as well, and I wasn't getting any opportunities, so it wasn't really going to happen. And I know that Alan Jones, who at the time was Glamorgan coach, had been on to Colin Page, who was the Kent second 11 coach. So I went to Glammy then for a trial, and in the first game I got naught in the first innings, and in the second innings I nicked off a guy called Steve Malone, ex-Hampshire quick bowler, and I snicked off, but it went between the keeper and first slip for 4, and I ended up getting 100, and then got a contract at the end of that year so that was 1984. So that was quite a significant game for me, and just shows how small the margins can be, because had that catch been taken and I was dismissed for a pair, the confidence level going forward into the other games would certainly not have been there. But getting 100, I was confident. I played well the rest of the season in other games, and then got offered a contract at the end of the year. So that was a real significant moment. And then probably the 2 innings, one on a winning side and one on a losing side, but just the occasion was the Lord's final in 2000. And scored a century against Gloucester. The Welsh crowd were going mental when I got to 50, and carried on singing, until after I got my 100. It was terrific. We actually fell away in the last 10 overs or so of that knock, thanks to some brilliant Ian Harvey bowling. So that was brilliant, scoring a century at the home of cricket in a final. And in 97 scored a century down at Taunton in the final game of the championship year. And we won that game, and so that was very, very enjoyable. It was always nicer and I always said that I got man of the match that Benson and Hedges century, but as I said at the time, I preferred to have got naught and we won the game, because the team outcome is far more important than the individual outcome. It's nice when you perform and the team win, obviously, because then it's great for both ways. But I'd always sacrifice a win for a personal, failure. Saying that, you can't do that too often, because you won't be in the side for too long. But I think that the team component is so important in the game of cricket, and always had from playing, as well as the individual success you have, but it's the team success which is paramount.
It's interesting. There's a couple of things you said then. The first thing is that initial game right at the start by Glamorgan, where it is a game of fine margins. It is. It's and it's just, it goes across all sports, doesn't it? Like where you have those fine margins where success and failure, it's someone's careers on the line as well a lot of the time. So it's interesting you go back to that particular moment, because that's something I don't think I would have never known about reading all your stats and information coming before it. But something that's very clear in your mind. The same wise with those. I actually remember the 2000 final because it was my first year in university, and I remember watching it on TV with some of the boys, and I remember that all happening.
Yeah.
So it's funny how that all happens, and certain things come.
And that's why I think. Yeah, go on. And I think that's. I think that's why for me, looking at process rather than outcome is so important from a coaching perspective. If you get the processes right more times than not, the success will come, but not always, because you can get freaky incidents in the game of cricket, as you can in any sport. Yeah. And every now and then there's you can't stop them, it's like a massive momentum swing, and it's so difficult to stop, and it's like Ireland really in rugby now, from fine losses, they've turned those into wins now. They've kind of found a way to do it, and looking very strong ahead of the World Cup later this year.
Yeah, no, it's honestly they're phenomenal, and they are the team to beat. It'd be such a good close matchup between them and New Zealand, I think, moving forward. Even South Africa as well, to be honest with you. But they're heads and shoulders above the rest of the top tier nations at the moment. They really are. And going into that freakish element of like things happening you can't control. Can you remember one of the worst, the worst or the weirdest way you've ever got out in your career?
Yeah, well, I've up in the office, I've still got a selection of photographs which were taken, the 6th photograph, and it's on a dismissal. David Gower and Ian, both of my 2 heroes when I was growing up, and Boff obviously never used to wear a helmet and stuff back in the day, and David Gower just used to wear a helmet that sat on his head with small earpieces.
That's it, yeah.
And I kind of liked that, and I loved that. Never had a full grill back in the day, and just had the earpieces. And I hit this ball off Mikey Holding, backward square, backward punch. It was a semi-final down at St Helens, and I creamed it off the back foot, just beat backward point. But as I completed the shot, my elbow clipped the earpiece, which dislodged the helmet, and it bounced and hit the stumps and dislodged the bail. So I was out, hit wicket. And because I didn't have a chin strap, the amount of abuse I got from that, if I had a penny for every time someone had mentioned that around that time, or for the 10 years afterwards, I'd be a very wealthy man. So so that was freaky. And another one I guess was not quite like Trescothic, but a ball was heading right down the leg side, and I went to flick it and got a bit of a Kevin Peterson flamingo type thing going, and the thing hit my back leg as it was in the air, rebounded off my foot back onto the stumps, bowled. So those are the 2 really that stand out.
It's funny in cricket, of all walks of life, from international level all the way down to club cricket, that you have these kind of freakish type moments or things like happening and stuff like that. So it's just good to hear. It's always kind of like nice to hear that other people have it as well. It's not just you yourself out there when you're listening out there. It happens to everybody, all walks of life.
And the thing is, they also tend to happen. I mean, I was actually in quite a good run of form prior to that semi-final, but quite often these freaky dismissals happen when you're on a bit of a run of low scores as well. It's like as if the cricketing gods are not looking after you at this particular time.
Yeah.
And they just kind of come together. I mean, Sam Northeast has been looking great, but he hasn't really scored many runs so far this year for us. And one ball that bounces in the whole match in our recent game against Durham just smashed into the top of his bat and clipped his gloves and just dollied to point. On another day, that would be wide of off stump. You'd go through and everyone would go, it's bounced a bit, that one, but not on this particular day. It's just that because you're searching for runs, they seem to find you. That's the thing about cricket. It seems to find you, and I don't know whether you look for it a bit more because you're searching for runs or whatever, but it can be a very, very cruel game.
Yeah, we always say Mother Cricket has this
Mm,
weird and mysterious ways
mm,
of getting you, doesn't it? Mother
yeah,
Cricket all the
yeah,
time. But it's interesting. You talk about like obviously the next question I was going to kind of lead into is like well, obviously you mentioned one of the names already. Like Mikey Holding is what you mentioned before. So obviously you face some of the best bowlers in the world, and then obviously throughout your career different varieties of bowls from spin to fast as well. Who do you describe as the toughest bowler you came up against in your career, or maybe there's more than one, and why was that?
yeah. Good question. There are a number. There are a number of high quality bowlers that we played against back in the day because you could have an overseas player. Malcolm Marshall at Hampshire, who played there for years. He was brilliant. Ian Bishop at Derby was a nasty bowler. He'd be in at you all the time. I've got the utmost respect for Courtney Walsh. I think the spells that he used to bowl for Gloucester, that it bowled for a session at times. You know, you think, oh, come on, he's into his seventh over. Maybe this will be his last one. And another 7 overs later, he's still bowling. He's just, but bowling within himself, still highly skilled and bowling his quicker ball every now and then. Alan Donald, when he first came over, he was absolutely rapid. Um, so look, we've been lucky. Imran Khan, Wasim Akram, Waka Yunus when he was at Surrey. Remember actually, we played Surrey at the Oval, and we're two down. I'm batting on 30 on or something like this, and Waka comes back on the bowl, and in his second over he gets a wicket, not me. And Ravi Shastri
Yeah.
and Ravi walks to the wicket. And I said to Ravi, he's bowling fairly sharp. And Ravi said, you wait, he'll be bowling sharp now. And I promise you, he went up for about 3 overs up to his maximum. And that was
Wow.
different gravy again. And
Really.
Ravi's first ball, obviously the Pakistan, India, the
Yeah.
love-hate relationship that they have. I mean, he steamed, and the first ball to Ravi wrapped him in front. And Ravi was 6'3", 6'4", wrapped him, and he played it brilliantly, but it was going right for his eyes. And he just managed to get his bat up, and it just dropped down in front of him. And I thought, well, he's played that brilliantly, absolutely. And he bowled. I faced about an over, maybe about 5 or 6 balls of that spell when he was really firing. Whoosh, it was right up there with the quickest I've faced. But Wasim Akram, because you could never, he rushed through the crease. He was a real tricky one. But I guess the greatest bowler, or the bowler I probably feared for my wicket more than any other, was Shane Warne. I think the others put fear in you because of how they bowled. We had some Wayne Daniel, Sylvester Clarke at Surrey back in the day. He was nasty, nasty bowler. Lovely bloke off the pitch, as was Wayne Daniel Diamond. As they all are, Courtney Walsh at Northend. I mean, there've been some fantastic
Hmm.
overseas players in the county game over the years. Bowlers, Mikey Holden, of course, as well. But Shane Warne was just a different level because you felt he could get you out any time. And I had some success against Warney, but I also had a number of failures as well. He was just a brilliant, brilliant bowler. Um, and he put you under pressure verbally as well, in a brilliant way, not in a nasty, just abuseful way. It was in a very clever way to get your mind thinking, to get you know, forgetting everything about playing the ball. He was a genius.
It's interesting you say that and everything on too. There's so many questions I could go down here now. So let's go back to the fast bowlers first before I come back to Warney and what stuff, some of the stuff he did. Now, obviously, we all know the speed of these guys are bowling in the time they're bowling rapid. But what was it like that really stands out from some of them in between? What was the differences between? Obviously, Courtney Walsh is taller than most of the
Mm.
bowlers as well. But what was the skill set with the ball per se that made them so different to face? What was that element? Obviously, the speed was what they all had roughly, but what was the skill set that had them that made them different and harder to
Well,
face?
Sun swung it. Marshall was a brilliant swing bowler. You couldn't pick his innie from his outie, and it went late, not just from the hand. So he generally bowled, I'd say, 85 for Hampshire. Never much more than that, really. Probably saved his absolute 100% for the Test arena. Your likes of Ian Bishop had that steepling bounce and jag the ball back into a right-hander, so it's always coming at your armpit type area. Very awkward to play. Courtney very similar, but Courtney's skill for me was his action wasn't easy, so you wouldn't pick the ball up. It might be an extra. You might pick the length up after about 5 yards out of the hand, whereas someone like Alan Donald, such a pure action, you could actually probably pick the length up 3 or 4 yards out the hand. I don't think it's ever been tested, but you obviously need to pick the length up. The quicker you can pick length up, the quicker you can be in position and play. So someone like Viv Richards, I would have thought he'd pick the ball. He was one of the greats. He'd pick the length up within three meters from the hand. Me, I'd probably pick it up 4.5 meters, 5. And then a club cricketer might pick it up 8-9 meters from the hand. And so you've got all this of how you kind of play length and and also the other thing was how someone bowled, whether you had a good sight of the ball, like Alan Donald, he had a great view of the ball, used to run in, show you the ball, and then bowl, and you could see it all the way through. Someone like Courtney, Sylvester Clark, kind of had these awkward actions where they'd fall away and then angle the ball into you. And, so they all had different attributes, of Patrick Patterson. All you'd see is that big front foot come up right before it slammed down, it leant back. So a little bit like the Shant Delang, there was a great clip of him bowling an over up at Worcester in the recent game where he terrorised, I think it was Haynes, and got him out, eventually caught slip off the glove, fending it off. But he came in and bowled, and that was very similar to, a lot of the stuff we used to face, but we don't get it as much these days as we did then because there's not as many quicks in county cricket these days.
Is it? Why is that, would you say?
But I don't think they're allowed to bowl these days. Okay. They're all restricted left, right and centre, I think if you look at where all the young quickies are coming from now, India have got a plethora of them. They keep popping up in the IPL. 88, 90 mile an hour bowlers, from that. And they just bowl. There's no restrictions in India. There's no, duty of care, if you like. I think we've all got a duty of care to our players and to young cricketers. But I think we wrap them up too much as well. I think bowling is a very stressful profession, and it puts a lot of stresses and strains on your body. It gets your body moving in areas that it's not designed to do. So, of course, it's going to break down. And to try and prevent all these breakdowns, they put in these X amount of overs you're allowed to bowl in spell. Well, you've got to build resilience somehow. The only way you can build resilience is by doing more of something. Not by gym work, not by getting on the weights in the gym and working straight line stuff. That is, young kids don't play like we used to play, and understandable, society's changed. So kids used to be out playing all day. Right, come in, you came in before the sunset, and that was it, And you'd be out playing, climbing trees, messing around, monkeying around, going, scrumping and stuff like this as well, and getting into a bit of trouble for it, nicking apples from people's gardens is, But it was a laugh, and you actually developed core strength without knowing that you're doing it. When you're mobile, you're moving and stuff like this. And we don't have enough of that as much these days, so we rely on sports to do that. But again, we should multi-sport more. We should let our young cricketers not be back in indoor school in November. Go and play football, go and play rugby, go and play badminton, go and play squash, go and play multi-sports, because all they're doing is developing your motor skills and your hand-eye coordination, which cricket is a lot about. Don't worry too much about the technical aspect of the game. The game's moving so quickly anyway now that learning a good forward defensive, actually, that's not relevant. Can you put that same ball over mid-wicket for 6? That's where the game's going, and that's where we have to totally reinvent how we look to coach our younger players, as well as Actually, do they need to come in November? No, no. Give them off till February, and get them in 3 times a week in February. Give them more time in February, when it's February and March in the lead up to the season. Intensify the training then, but they don't need to be in November. Anyway, that's just me. That's my
No, no, but
my personal opinion.
it's
And you develop
no, no,
skills
but it's
close to the season, and the kids are then developing, fundamentals of fitness playing other sports.
And because it's interesting, because obviously, there's some load of stress factors going around the England camp at the moment, and the professional county grade, and even a lot of youngsters who you don't even hear about having stress fractures, not making the higher grade. So I think it's an important discussion to have, and then also see how it happens in other countries like India, where there's a whole plethora, as you said, of fast bowlers coming through. And it's interesting. The few things I always use Jimmy Anderson. I don't know Jimmy Anderson personally, but what I can say is when I see him on the cricket field and moving around, even off the cricket field and walking around, he moves differently to everybody else. And I always use him. Okay, he's not the fastest bowler in the world, but he's one of the best ones there's ever been. In terms of his skill set and what he's done. So fast enough is fast enough. Now, what you see with Jimmy, I think, and I don't know him personally. You probably have better insight than I do. But he moves so elegantly and so efficiently. He can do these things. When I see a lot of other bowlers, also in the county game, when I was watching, I've been down and watched quite a few county games in the last couple of years as well. They have what I call very heavy legs and very stiff bodies. Their shoulders are so tight and stiff, their hips are so tight and stiff that they're having to put extra force onto the ball because they haven't got that elegance and that efficiency, that movement economy and efficiency, like say Jimmy Anderson has to go through. And I wondered, if people should be looking at those things just as much to prevent injury, as well as before they even get to the strength training side. 100%. So anyway, it's my comment. I see a lot.
100%. But we're not mobile. We're not mobile enough. We're not athletic enough. Athletic development has kind of gone out the window. It's strength and conditioning. Well, conditioning for me is getting athletic, building athletes, and you don't just build athletes by pumping iron. It's about how fluid you can move. I think Jimmy Anderson is a great example because a 41-year-old who still probably moves the same speed as he did when he was 31. His efficiency and his run up, he gets everything out of what he needs to. He's got great stamina. He's got length of career. 41 years old now. Is tremendous. Michael Hogan, exactly the same. Mobile. He gets around the field beautifully. He's not gym strong, but he's widely strong. But he's flexible with it, and these guys hardly ever get injured. When they tried to correct Jimmy Anderson's action, because on release Jimmy looks at the ground because his head falls away and he looks at the ground on release. When they tried to correct that and tried to get him to stand up, they actually stress fractured his back. He got a stress fracture. So he went. No, I'm doing it this way, and he went and did it that way. So you have all this. Theories going on about the right action, the wrong action, when you should have long levers or whether you should have short levers like a Brett Lee or long levers like Jacques Callis and Courtney Watt. And they all kind of differ and stuff like this, Well, just let the bowler bowl how he bowls, but just get him more athletic. Athletic is it. I'd be amazed to see, or I'd love to see, I've never seen it, but I'd love to see what kind of training Olympic gymnasts do. Because
I've seen a lot of it. Honestly, it's funny.
Unbelievably strong, but they're so flexible with it. So flexible.
Yep. Same with Olympic weightlifters. Look at the Chinese team who do Olympic weightlifting. Their stretching routines are more brutal than you can ever imagine. And what they do, they're not just. There's what I call a spectrum. You have a spectrum of strength training. You have the powerlifters who are very static and they can't move, and the bodybuilders on the other side. So they got hypertrophy on one side, bodybuilders. Then you got the Olympic weightlifters in the middle who are mobile as well and flexible as well as agile and fast. And not that I'm saying by the way any cricketer should be doing Olympic weightlifting because their shoulders are fragile enough at the best of times from all the throwing and bowling that they do anyway. But the point is, there is that happy medium. I think you've got to find. Again,
you talk about the flexion in the hips. So when those weightlifters go down and they're pushing 400 pounds, and they get in that squat position, their arse is almost touching the heels.
Exactly.
And that is proper flexion. That's proper mobility in that hip. in that hip
Yeah.
area. And you quite a lot of our cricketers do not have that kind of mobility in the hip area, and it's fundamental, a really important area of the game to allow you to move and trace a ball and track a ball on the way to the boundary, to move that split second quicker as you're turning between the wickets, all this kind of stuff. If you've got all those, if you've got more athleticism into our athletes, I think we'd see more Jimmy Andersons playing the game.
But I think again, this is going to be coming back to Cardiff for the last couple of years. I've been out of the country for such a long time, and coming back into cricket after a long spell away. Seeing this and seeing the changes here, so I can just talk about. I can't talk about what happens at pro level. That's not my thing. But what I can say is I've seen a lot of people trying to push for a contract or trying to get into the setup in the academies who haven't got basic mobility and flexibility. But the other thing I see them with, they haven't got what we call basic motor control around the hips. So they don't know what the difference between a hinge and a squat. And I talk this quite a lot. So you see a lot of people struggling to get like an athletic stance because their brain isn't allowing them to get into that athletic stance in the first place. So I always come back to education. That's not saying it's the fault at the top, because there's only so many things you can do. But there's an education. I think there's a flaw in the education system from grassroots level up across cricket around the world. I think that they don't teach people the importance of mobility, flexibility, and the importance of motor control in terms of hinging and versus squatting, because they're two very different movements. And one's an athletic stance, that hinge, which allows you to jump faster. And if if you're in a ring and come in and set yourself, you're trying to set yourself into this athletic stance to move forwards. But they don't know that differentiation, which then causes a massive issue, and it compounds when they add more weight on top of that, which leads to big breakdowns. That's my personal opinion. I can go off on what I see. But
there's an academy now based down in Hyderabad that has about 260 young Indian kids in it, and they spend as much time on their agility than they do batting and bowling. They are, and I worked actually the S&C and the physio who work at that particular academy in Hyderabad were in the ILT 20 in Dubai and the UAE in January this year, and that's all they talk about. And as a coach, if you throw for 2 or 3 hours of a day, you've got to go and see the physio. You've got to go and see the And it's none of the stuff they ever did was around strength. It was about stretching. It was about mobility. It was about a little bit of building up strength, on the bands and stuff for the shoulders, for our shoulder stability as coaches and stuff like that. But not as much that way, because we throw that way. All about the other way, and everything they do is stretching out. Obviously, all these areas. It was brilliant. It's far way ahead of what I see in a professional environment at Glamorgan, for example, where it's like they've moved away totally from the strength, and it's all about mobility. If someone has to build up a bit of strength, well, they do it by using the bands, or they do it by getting them doing the sit-ups and press-ups and basic squat jumps and squat thrusts, and old school, if you like. And all through body weight, as opposed to putting false weights on there and resistance stuff. So I was really intrigued by it. I'm hoping to go out. Actually, I've got an invite to go out to the academy in India. So I'd love to see that in operation, because I think something like that is, they've actually got another site now as well in Delhi, and they're looking at opening a third one. So they take up about 500 kids they look after. At the moment, and they're hoping to get out at 750.
But it's interesting in some respects. Just go back to, again, coming back to Cardiff. And this year we've made a big difference at Cardiff. And I'll actually talk to you about Cardiff, because you had a year playing at Cardiff as well, which the boys have reminded back. But
we won the league
what I've seen is,
didn't we? Yeah, we won the league that year.
Apparently so. Yeah, I was away in Melbourne for that when that happened. But I remember it happening and stuff like that. But it was. But we'll ask you about that in a second now. But what I found is that now this winter at Cardiff, I've been allowed to get more hands-on with the kids and the adults as well, with the coaching setup. We've got a new load of influx of players coming in, and we've changed the setup. And one of the first things I saw straight away, and again, it's no fault to any of the guys here, they're a great bunch of guys, but not one of them have been taught basic sprinting mechanics. So And sprinting mechanics adds to agility and power development and athleticism. And the other thing it adds to is coordination. So little things like A-skips and marching drills, it adds coordination, it switches the brain on, right? And it allows you to get on properly with what you're trying to do. So coordination is a big part of cricket. Judging speed and depth of ball and stuff is important too. But they struggle with that. They're highly skilled batsmen and bowlers, highly skilled for Premier League cricket in South Wales. But they struggle with those basics. And I saw that with a lot of people vying for the academy as well and going into it. And again, you've only got so much time. Obviously, it's not me having to go at anybody in any academy anywhere in the UK because they've only got they've got so many players coming through and a finite time with finite resources. But lower down the level in schools, other educations, other sports, no one's teaching them basics, which in America they have nailed down straight away. They've absolutely nailed down from a young age all these track and field goals, all these athleticism drills. And I think there's a lot we can learn from over in the States, who are, I'd say, from my personal and professional experience, 15 years ahead of some of the stuff happening in the UK and some other parts of the rest of the world. Now, I think the UK is great in some parts, but there's lots of stuff we can learn from the States here now as well.
If you look at their tracking, you look at all their data that they collect on their sports people, in comparison to what we do in this country. It's crazy, that they'll have a book like that on an individual through his college, through all this, everything.
Yep.
And we have maybe a scrap of paper. It's totally different. We are, I'd say, potentially further behind than that, Bridget. And look, it's not necessarily Glamorgan's fault because they get subsidised by the ECB for putting in S&Cs, and the S&Cs have to follow a certain criteria that the ECB want.
Yeah.
So unless our governing body changes its thinking on, what type of, what type of conditioning works best for our players and athlete development works best for our players, and we'll never move if it's always the same. Because I see our S&C now, our current one, doing very similar stuff to what Tom Turner was doing at club 10 years ago. Well, so you're telling me that S&C hasn't developed over the last 10 years when there's been such an increase in so many other areas? Of course it has, but because I don't know whether it's the ECB are blindsided by it or what. I don't know the reason for it, but I know that cricket's certainly missing a trick with it. And as I say, I'd love to see a lot more of it. We see some unbelievable fielding. Don't get me wrong at the moment. Some of the fielding that we, again, in the IPL, like you're watching the IPL, you watch some of the England white ball stuff. Someone like Jason Roy is terrific. But there are others there in that side who actually aren't that good, and they have to make do with it. And I think in the county game, generally, fielding has improved. But again, there's still much more that it can go. And it's such a vital part of the game.
Right. It is a vital part, and I think just a caveat from me knowing so many S&Cs and physios who work in the game, I have to say, like, I've come from a very different perspective. I learned all my trade in the States and then moved over here, and there's now with S&Cs, there's so much time and pressure and everything, resources put onto them to do so many different things that they haven't got time to potentially do sometimes like outside education to go and visit other places. And I see, and they are constricted by the research, the science, and what they have to go down and follow down here. So I think there is some constraints, and I think it does have to come from higher up. 100%. I think that it's the higher up that drive what they can do and can't do. I think so. I think I'm sure, and there's a lot of great people out there, and shout out to them because I know a lot of them as well. So there is an idea.
Have more of obviously one of the great books, but also a great movie and based on the true story is Moneyball. When did that come out? When
2003, something
right,
like that.
So that's 20 years.
Was that?
That's 20 years ago, and then they weren't going on what's your opinion. Give me data. Give me raw data on this guy. How many times did he hit the ball out of the park? How many times? How many times can he stop the batter sitting out of the park as a pitcher? Give me the absolute facts, not you like him because he does something. Give me the absolute facts on these guys. And they built that whole team, didn't they, around this stats based on these players who were a lot cheaper than the perceived better players, but actually the returns were better than the better players were because they saw value differently. And it was just a really interesting thing. But that's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it was. I'll double check this like after the end, but I'm sure it was that long ago because it's funny that Moneyball. There's two things: Moneyball and the film The Founder with Michael Keaton that inspired me to set up our assessment system and how we train and coach
okay.
people. Because again, that sounds crazy, but McDonald's. It's the same. You get the same burger around the world because they have a system in place, and it's a everyone from Bangkok to Hong Kong to LA know how to make a Big Mac, right? It's the most widely sold burger around the world. It's a pretty shitty burger, right? But it's the same burger, and people love that consistency. So I was like, oh, that's a really good system to have these things in place, and then combine that with Moneyball to have the data and the stats in place, so you know what's going in front of you. So like, I'll give you an example. We talk about like loading heavy barbells and like loading people onto it. From us personally, for me personally, in my team, when we're doing coaching, we don't load heavy barbells onto people's backs until they can do 75% of their body weight on one leg for 8 reps in a split squat, right? And that's having a dumbbell here. We don't allow them to get until they have basic strength. Now, if you get to that sort of levels anyway, you're pretty darn strong. Whereas my thoughts, and again, I don't work at elite cricket, so I can't comment, but I can see from other sports, like particularly in professional baseball, which I've had a bit of experience in, they don't like loading heavy barbells onto baseball players because it impacts their shoulders and makes them throw slower, particularly on pitches, and it damages their back. And a lot of them have found that the majority of back pain is caused by having a barbell on their back in the first place. So they've actually eliminated barbells from all their squatting programs for the majority of the time. So it's interesting how the Moneyball and the stats and the data is used to drive those things and tie them all into place. So. But I digress. We've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but coming back to Shane Warne now. Okay, obviously you talk about his verbals and stuff here. But what was it like facing him in terms of like the actual ball coming through? What was it made him different, or the ball coming through the air, like picking it up, or the trajectory, or the speed? How would he compare to some of the other spinners you faced as well?
Well, as a leg spinner, he hardly bowled a bad ball. I think that was one of his fortes. The control he had on what is the most difficult art in our game. Bowling leg spin, whether it's a right arm or a left arm, is a tough art. And he used to get so many revs on it, but also was so accurate. And just the fields he would set, brilliant fields, intimidatory fields with men sniffing around you. But then if you wanted to have a slog sweep, he'd have a deep mid wicket. So he blocked that one off. We didn't reverse sweep in the day. But that was probably his strength. How he set up these fields to bowl was a great skill. He would put, as I say, he would put you under pressure. You'd know how you'd want to try and score and try and eliminate those big scoring options. Because as batters, we all like to score boundaries. We always want to keep the scoreboard going with boundaries in any format. And he seemed to block those off. And that's why they talked about Warney in '05, and we used this Merlin machine, which is an invention of these chaps from Ross on Wye area, farmers basically. And he built this robot of a Merlin, this leg spinner, but it had to be controlled by those guys. It wasn't an easy system, and we had this. And basically, what Duncan Fletcher and Michael Vaughan wanted was they knew that Warney was going to take wickets in the series. There's no way that we're going to stop that. But let him take it at a higher cost. So let's be more proactive. Let's be more positive against him. So the boys did an incredible amount of work on this machine. And we did. We scored boundaries off him. We hit him for sixes. We scored boundaries off him. He got wickets as expected, but at more cost. So we played a lot more positive style against him. I thought it was brilliant kind of leadership from Vaughan and Fletcher to do that. And then my job as an assistant coach and batting coach was to make sure that they trained, got in various positions to be able to do what the captain and coach wanted. And so that was brilliant. But he was, just his variation on how much spin he put on the ball. So he'd rip the odd one hard, he'd rip one a little bit, and obviously then he'd bowl his flipper that would just kind of skid on through, which is just brilliant skills.
Yeah. Nice, it's interesting. So, like, to going back again, keeping this theme, like we had a little tangent of S&C in the middle, but let's keep on the theme of you as a batsman. So, a lot of the top batsmen, all the commentators, they always talk about the most important balls you face are the first 20 balls when you go out to bat. So, put yourself back into your mindset then, back as a player. What was your mindset going through in terms of those first 20 balls? What was going through your head when you were walking out to the crease, and what was your mindset around those first 20?
Play straight.
If you actually use those first
Play
20.
straight.
Play straight.
Yeah. That was mine. That was an old philosophy. I had a coach when I was 14. I left Maynard Cricket Club because they were in the lower leagues at that stage. Currently, the top of the Premier League. They've been brilliant up in the North Wales Premier League for the past 10 years or so, winning it about 6 times. They're a really great club. But at that time, they were playing more in the Carnarvonshire, Anglesey and Carnarvonshire League, and Bangor were playing in the North Wales League. So I moved to Bangor. And at the same time, they had a groundsman coach player called Bill Clutterbuck join them. And we struck up a great relationship. And he helped me with my batting enormously in those important years, 14, 15, 16. And actually, to an extent, I used him throughout my career. And either I'd go over down to Surrey to see him, where his head groundsman at Guildford at that stage, or he would come to Cardiff and spend a week. And after training with Glammy, I'd then be in the nets for 6 hours with Bill. And that's how we used to operate. So I'd get all my work done. So we went to 12-month contract. I'd get all my work done in about a week or so with Bill. And it was highly intensive, would cover everything. But the whole idea of the game plan, I wasn't much of a cutter. I was a good, decent off the back foot punching, good puller and hooker. But early on in my innings, it was all about playing straight. So looking to hit in the V. So very old school in that kind of manner, I was quite good down the ground and held good position, but I wasn't as strong square, especially on the offside. It was more, more round from cover and then round to mid wicket. And as I got in then, and as I started play spin then I'd look to sweep if it was turning. So first 20 balls you're in spin in the 4th innings. So it's Peter Such playing for Essex, right? What's your field? Okay, you got a silly point, slip. There, no 45, right? I'm just going to paddle sweep you. I'll walk you. Because I know you're not going to miss your length. You don't miss your length. And the easiest ball to paddle sweep is the ball that's going to get you out bat pad. So in my career, I only got out twice caught bat pad, which is incredible after, the spinners I've faced. One actually was at Silly Point, one at bat pad. Tim May at Silly Point, and in a test match when the day my daughter was born, actually. That was the day I got a daughter and a duck in the same day. So that was called Silly
Congratulations.
Point. And then and then the other was Tufnell at Cardiff.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, only twice, but I'd paddle and so I'd know my 20, depending on what, who you're playing against. So if it was Mike Holding on green top, I've got to stay straight on him for as long as possible. If he drops it short, I'm getting out of the way early doors. I'm not trying to take him on because I haven't got used to the pace of the pitch or anything. So I would very rarely pull until I was, probably 20 or 40, depending on how I felt in the conditions. Pull or hook the quickies until, I got quite a few. And the rest of the time it was just playing, if it's coming out the ribs, just work him, let the ball hit the bat and get down the fine leg for 1 or 2 or to backward square. But generally just straight, leave straight. If they overpitch, I wouldn't have to think about that. So if it was a 6-stump half volley, I'd try and hit it through the covers. It wasn't one that you leave bad balls alone. I'd still go after bad balls, but my focus was straight. That other stuff then became kind of instinct. But my focus was straight.
Because you see so many, again, I'm talking about, because there's a lot of club cricketers who are listening to this podcast and here, and I see a lot of cricketers get out very early doors, trying to play across the line and stuff here, but something as simple as that, where you're going to the crease knowing play straight, judge the pace of the ball. That's such simple advice, but it's also very intelligent advice in terms of like building an innings, right?
Yeah, but it wouldn't work for everyone. So we have a
Yeah.
couple of players at Glamorgan now who that wouldn't work for them. I know that wouldn't work for them. We've got a couple who it
Okay.
does work for, but there's certain players who are more square looking. They hit square of the wicket well. They cut well. They flick off. They actually flick balls very well. So that wouldn't it doesn't work for them because their strength is not hitting down the ground. It's hitting cover. Billy Reed's a great example of that. Beautiful. Yeah, lets it come on late and just bangs it into the turf, and it's square off both front and back foot. Asking Billy to continuously hit straight, he would struggle to do that. And it's just the way his
Interesting.
body works, but he plays the ball lovely and late and just lets it come in and punches, bang, and smacks it through cover or cover point. So Billy got a double hundred against Northants about 4 years ago now. And if he hits, you know how they do those cheese square things around the ground. If
Yeah.
he got 15 runs between wide mid off and wide mid on, I'd be amazed. It was probably more like 8 or 10. Yeah,
Interesting.
I mean he can
No,
hit spin there,
it's
but not seam as he's. So that's just an example. Kieran Carlson, very strong offside there, good off his hips. Can flick ball.
yeah.
But again, you wouldn't say he was a dead straight player. Not like someone like Johnny Bairstow. You
Yeah.
know, someone like Andrew
Interesting.
Stowes back in the day, big square of the wicket. Wanted to hit down the ground all the time, looked to hit down the ground, but actually that was his forte through there. Alistair Cook, very similar. So, the players have to, but look, they play on very good wickets. On a real good
Yeah.
international wicket. Ball, once you're in, you're in. You can hit the ball where you want, really. So I guess
It's
that's it.
interesting.
Whereas on club decks, which I was bang, it was straight. You had to be straight because as soon as you went across the line, you could get leading edges and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's interesting. So in that same terms, because I remember listening to a podcast a few years ago, which I found fascinating. It was talking about Ricky Ponting. And Ricky Ponting was talking about himself and how he was setting up at the crease and what he was thinking. And I remember the quote he said was, when he was setting up, he was always used to mouth to himself 3 times, watch the ball at the start of the run-up, the middle of the run-up, and the point of release to allow him to concentrate on when the ball was releasing and to focus on the ball. Not because he didn't know to watch the ball, but to close the noise of everything else out. And I remember that being one of the best tips I've ever learned for me batting when I'm batting at club cricket. That's a really simple thing. Close all the other noise off. What was your routine at the crease before facing? Let's start with the fast bowls. What was your routine at the crease before facing the quicks, and did it differ for the spinners?
not really, no, it didn't differ. My triggers differed. But again, just looking to hit the ball straight, generally off the quicks early on in my innings. I would scratch. So when I took guard, it'd be 6 scratches, and I scratched from the stumps out, not towards the stumps. I liked a nice, clean batting area. So if a bowler had bowling at the batter's end for the previous over, and he'd left a chunk of mud had come off his boot. Some people that's like I'd have to kick. I'd clear that out of the crease area. So the crease is mine. Crease is mine. I own the crease. So that was my area. So I'd look after that, and I'd scrape 6 times out onto the wicket from the stumps out, turn my back on the bowler, scrape out. I'd put my back leg on the scrape. I wasn't worried about where the bat was. It was my back foot was on that middle leg or middle stump, whichever one I wanted. To turn my back foot. Then I'd take and have a good look at the field, check where they were. Then I'd look again at the gaps. So I wouldn't just concentrate on whether I'd do one with the fielders, and then the second time I'd look around, I'd look at the gaps, bang, bang,
Interesting.
bang, and then I'd be ready to face a bowler. And he'd come in and I'd tap, 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 and then up and play. And then after 3 balls of an over, if I hadn't gotten off strike, I'd double scrape for the 4th ball. If I scored any runs off a ball, next ball I'd double scrape. So and people say, does that become habit? Does that always put my left pad on first for my
Yeah.
right pad? But is that habit? Left shoe on, left sock on, left shoe on, all that kind of. Is that habit or is that just routine? And did I do it once? and got success, so carried on doing it, you know. So cricketers can be quite superstitious, can't they? You know, kind of
Yeah,
funny
it
that.
can
But
be.
that was kind of my routine, and that didn't alter. The only thing that altered was my trigger movements when I was playing spin. So
Interesting.
I'd have a double trigger movement against seamers, and against spin I'd just have a single movement. Which after Duncan Fletcher worked with Glammy in '97, he coined the phrase the forward press. So the forward press came from what he'd seen, and he asked me about it. And all I was doing basically was copying Mike Gattin after a conversation with him, um,
Interesting.
about playing spin. Because Crofty kept on dropping it short to Gatt, and he kept on rocking back and hitting him through the covers. And I said, Crofty, and he said, Crofty said, I think he's coming down the wicket. So that night we're in the tavern, after play, as we used to with the opposition. Most nights you'd spend some time in the bar and just chat. And I went and sounded out Gat, and I said, Gat, the movement you do to spin. He says, yeah, I want to make them think I'm coming down the wicket. So I'll do it, and I'll come down the wicket, and then I'll do it and stay back and wait for the shorter ball. And that's exactly what he did. So I started doing this movement, and it was brilliant because it got me in a position where I could, from after doing that movement, I could easily rock back and play it through short. I could advance again if I wanted to. I could sweep without having to move my feet again, unless I had to. If the length wasn't quite there, I could then go out and sweep again. So it was a brilliant, and it kind of changed. Just that one movement that I did changed how I played spin throughout my career prior to that. Because spin was just,
Interesting.
I was a big, kind of like the Aussie, use my feet, use my feet, use my feet. And then after a period, people would know that, so the tech feel. But then, and I got out a couple of times stumped because they read me coming or whatever. So I then knew I needed to develop my sweep. So I then spent a lot of time training myself. So you talk about Ricky Ponton's focus. Ricky had a hard focus, what we'd call a hard focus. So similar to me, hard focus, look at the seam of the ball. That if I can see the individual stitches on the ball, I know I'm in great touch. I know I'm in great form.
Okay.
But other people, so some people like that, like me, Alex Stewart was the same, Ricky Ponting. If someone was moving behind the side screen, they'd pull away because it was in their periphery. They hated that. Even though you kind of fixed on that ball, you can still see movement. Hated that. Whereas there's the other vision, soft vision, where actually you don't want them to focus on the ball. They're the guys. Mike Atherton had soft vision. So Ath would watch the action, and he'd pick up if you're going to bowl an in-swinger from seeing that front arm go early, and then watch the wrist, watch a leg spinner's hand how it came, whether a finger popping up here. Devon Malcolm used to cock his wrist a bit more if he was going to bowl a bouncer. He'd see all those signs, which I would miss because I had this hard focus. Ricky Ponting would have missed it because he had this hard focus. But those guys with a soft focus would they kind of see their periphery, and there's quite an easy way of determining whether someone's got hard focus or soft focus, and it's great.
How is that? That's the first thing I was about to ask. Then, how do you determine? Because I've never heard that idea of hard focus and soft focus.
Well,
how do you help?
It's a similar philosophy to, some cricket coaches will say get your head to the ball, others will say get your feet to the ball, and that's only because that's their style of movement. So if you look at someone like Joe Root play the ball, he gets right into the ball and hits it. If you looked at back in the day, Jacques Callis would hit it from more mid crease. Billy's a bit like, sorry, Joe's a little bit like that. Oh, my battery's very, very low here, mate. So I'm going to have to do something about that.
No, let's carry on. This is live. It's all good.
So you see where people hit the ball, where they would actually strike the ball will determine whether they move from the top or the bottom. So You got some batters who get right their head over that front leg nice and easy and drive the ball into the ground just ahead of themselves, and they are what I would call, excuse me, they are what I would call a move from the top, and the guys who move their feet to the ball are guys who move from the bottom, and we all develop that in our early years. By the time we're 6, 7, that's already formed in our bodies. Whether we're rhythmical players, whether we're quite static, whether we a copier type player, all these things kind of determined by how we develop naturally as youngsters. Excuse just 2 secs.
Yeah, it's all right.
So all this,
I'd rather you have battery.
All this stuff is, for not, but it's not the core of all my coaching philosophies or anything like that. But it obviously plays quite a part in it. But it's not what it's all about for me. There are other aspects which are kind of more important than that.
So to dive into this, because it's kind of like transitioning into the coaching aspect here. What would you say is your, like, obviously we know batting technique is crucial in cricket, but what are the most important aspects of having solid batting technique? What are your core concepts when it comes to batting? The foundations that you'd like to see most batters have? Because obviously there's individuality, flair, and all that involved as well. But what are the core basics you would like to see from a batter that kind of leads into that kind of topic as well?
So what do the best batsmen do? If you have a look at the best batsmen, what they do, well, they start from a balanced position and move to another balanced position. So fundamentally, that becomes down to, right, so if you're not balanced on completion of shot, is your head the wrong side of the ball? Have your feet not moved? So a number of things. So that's, can I move from a balanced position to another balanced position? Answer's yes, excellent. What's my bat path like? So when I talk about bat path, if you look at Steve Smith, I might have a bat here to show. Oh, I haven't got a bat, but I've got a tube. So Steve Smith is out here. He's out here playing.
Yeah.
But then when he comes down to see the ball, he engages that top shoulder and the bat comes down nice and straight back into the ball. So his back pat is here, his hands are out here, aren't they? He does all that. So I look at that final. So in the final instances of the ball's coming through, is your bat getting back into line and making contact with the ball? And that's what I would class as my back path that I look at. And your transition of weight is which you can be balanced but neutral balanced.
Yeah.
Or you can be balanced with a bit more forward. So I want to see my players balanced but with a good momentum to move forward. So if that's a back foot punch, I still would like them to be still their head in a position where it's rather than back. I can still be balanced here, but I'm now on the back foot. And I can be balanced going to drive the ball here, but I'm actually standing too upright and there's no momentum then through the ball. So I want to see that momentum through the ball. So, and they're the fundamentals really of my coaching philosophy, but a number of things then will stem from that,
Okay. But you've got those three basic kind of core elements, and obviously there's a lot of more things that go into batting. We know batting is highly technical. In fact, probably what I've discovered by doing this podcast, people out there love to listen to the technical analysis. That's what they love doing. Not so keen on the fitness side of things or the mobility things, but they love the technical things. So I try and sneakily put in that fitness and mobility stuff as part around this technical analysis that you're doing already. So okay, so you've got those as a balance. But what about, if you're looking at some of the, let's talk about the Aussies you've got in camp at the moment. You obviously got Maynard in here, is one of the best batsmen in the world, test batsmen in the world at the moment. What is it that sets those guys at the top from the good players? There's lots of good players in county cricket. They are good players. They're all professionals, right? But then what's the difference in technique and batting that makes someone go from good to great?
I think the difference that takes people from good to great are the things that I've just mentioned, plus the ability to pick length earlier. So I think your good county players pick length early, early-ish. Your great county players pick it earlier. So the ability to focus and concentrate, switch on and off, is critical. And so I think isn't it proven that you can't concentrate for 40 minutes?
Something like that. Yeah, there's something. There's a couple of studies. Yeah.
There's been various studies that you can't concentrate. So what you have to do in cricket when you've got a 6-hour day is switch on and off your concentration. So as a batter, I would not concentrate when the ball was running in. But when I did my last tap of the bat, that was my full focus and of concentration watching that ball.
Okay.
So it was like you're building up to this focus of concentration and doing that time after time after time after time after time. Steve James was brilliant at it, probably the best primary player for doing that. And once he got in, he converted. His centuries to 50 stats are probably, if he passed 50, 60 times, he'd score 60 centuries. Or 30 50s, or 30 scores between 50 and 100, and 30 100-plus scores. A 300-plus score, 4 other double century scores in first-class cricket.
Yeah.
He had a brilliant ability of just concentration, fixture on the next ball. Doesn't matter what had happened. That was his sole focus, was the next ball.
So what would you say? Obviously, is there a way of helping batsmen pick up length early? I
think things like that that's just their natural brilliance.
Sure.
That's their.
Okay.
It's like, can you train people to be as quick as Usain Bolt?
Yeah. Okay. It's good. It's good.
I think your top boys just have that ability to pick that length up. Even if it's half a yard quicker, half a yard is 2 miles an hour in terms of pace. 4 mile an hour is every yard apparently. So I think that's just you can train to get better, but it's really, really intense work, and you'll have a ceiling of how far you can go. You'll have a ceiling of how. One, because of, I think that preparation takes an incredible amount of courage to do, because it's quite terrifying. You'll be doing a lot of short stuff, testing out your throat and the top of your chest kind of work to make sure you get used to that length, and then up with a full. So I think there's only a limited amount of time you can do that. Otherwise, you'll shell shock even the best batters. Everyone's got a limit of how many times you can be hit on the head. So
yeah. So in terms of getting concentration, because I always say this, and again, it's just something that I've always seen again at club cricket. And again, I understand in club cricket nets, you have 2 hours if you're lucky, right? And there's a load of boys who want to bat, some want to bowl, and you have like a 5-10 minute slot batting if you're lucky, right? And then people have live work outside of this. But I always see this, that if you train for 5-10 minutes of concentration, you take that into a game on Saturday. And I see that time and time again, particularly with a lot of the youngsters now, within the ranks coming through Cardiff and some of the other clubs, is that they take this 5-10 minute concentration period, right? And they get out quite easily and quite cheaply, score a couple of boundaries and then out. And that's their 5 minutes of 10 minutes time, which matches and mirrors their net thing. So in terms of concentration for you
can't really do much about that in that situation, can you? Because you are trying to service people, it's time management. You want to give everyone a hit, you want to give everyone a bowl, and it's just kind of the way it is. But you imagine in that, they're probably facing 3 times the amount of bowlers they would be in a game situation, So if they can learn to switch on and off in between bowlers coming to them, then that'll help them develop their concentration for each individual ball rather than for 10 minutes. That's the key to them. So it might be 10 minutes in a net, but if they can learn to switch on and off each ball, then that becomes 30 minutes in a match. And by the time you're batting 30 minutes in a match, you're established in your head.
So is there stuff like when you do with the pros who have got more time to do this? Do you encourage them to bat longer to improve concentration, or what are the stuff that you do to improve that?
We give them more time. I mean, COVID was brilliant for us, because we were only allowed to work one-on-ones. And, the amount of time that guys would be out batting for 2 hours straight. That's a lot of balls out. that they're
Yeah.
facing. So they'll be facing, some of that work would be done on the Merlin spin machine. Some would be doing on Truman, the shadow machine. Others would be on the traditional bowling machine and sling. So you're mixing up the variety of what work they're doing, but they're literally batting for 2 hours at a go. Now, it was COVID was very good for that, but horrendous for coaches because the players would have a 2 hour
Yeah.
slot, but your coaches would be having
The coaches all the time.
8 hour days, because 8-10 hour
Yeah.
days non-stop, because you had to rotate the players. So again, it becomes down to time management issue is exactly the same in the county game as it is in club cricket. But as a club player, they've all got facilities to the AstroTurf down in Cardiff, and you can take. But the key thing to learn is actually, once you've played that delivery, just either mark your guard for the next ball. I know you might delay in nets a little bit, but restart again, start that focus again, rather than just right, next one's in. And nets can be very often a rush, and the next bowler just wants the ball, and next one, whoa, take your time, learn this mental skill of switching on and off, rather than just concentrate for 10 minutes while you're batting that net.
I think that's such a great tip. I think I'll definitely be trying that, because that's what I find the times facing the bowlers. It's like a train that coming one after the other, and it's hard. You got to hold them back, and then you stop them in their mid run up as they're coming in, because they get annoyed. It's like, oh crap! But I like the idea of switching on and off and starting again is a very simple thing. Really good. So in terms of coaching, so let's just progress to coaching now. Here's a question for you: what have you learnt in coaching now that you wish you may have learnt and had in your career early on? I know people say they don't have regrets and stuff like that, but the idea is there anything you've learnt in your time from being a coach now, post-playing career, that you wish, damn, I wish I knew that when I was playing?
Oh, look, the game's evolved, doesn't it? And I wish I had, some of the shots that the boys have these. I wish I had the foresight to have played the ramp shot and the reverse ramps and all this kind of business, but they weren't, they were nowhere. If you played a reverse paddle, in my day, you kind of frowned upon almost, but it became a real big shot of mine in the one day game, and ultimately actually it made it tough for probably one of our greatest one day bowlers, Steve Barwick, who used to bowl with a 6-3 leg side field in one day career, which you used to be allowed to do. And as soon as that reverse paddle, again, he had to bring one over to the offside to stop the reverse paddle and bowl to a 5-4, which meant singles to square leg became a lot easier. So stuff like that, just how the game has evolved and invented, I would love to be part of it. But that's the way the game is, you can say that.
Yeah.
I love the period I played in. And I'm loving this period that I'm coaching in as well, because that's also, to try and get guys to do all this stuff and give them the freedom, Well, there was a great Welsh coach, Tom Cartwright, great as bowler and coach, but Tom was very much a stickler for playing straight. And even if he used to sweep in his net, he'd chuck you out. He didn't believe the sweep shot was a valid shot in the game, let alone the ramp and reverse sweep and stuff like that. And he'd pull you out the net because he wanted you to use your feet and hit mid-on and to the offie and all this kind of business, And so the game. No, I don't think from a playing, I regretted anything or missed out on anything that was there at my time. It's just that the game has evolved, and it's been brilliant to be part of the game. I talked to you earlier about the Shane Warne, how we won about him in 2005, being a lot more positive against him, and and as I say, that was led by the captain and coach. And as we see England playing now, this brand of cricket we're playing, that's been led by the captain and coach. Fundamentally, the same players were playing in the same test that had won 1 out of 17 test matches, and got hammered by the West Indies in the Caribbean. I couldn't buy a win, and all of a sudden, different philosophy, different way of playing. Take all the pressure off, just go and play, bang, success. And it's been brilliant, baseball, whatever you want to call it. It's been brilliant for the county game. To see, but fantastic for any fans of cricket watching the Ashes this year. That's the shirt I was on about earlier. It says, to Matt, better luck next time, Mikey Holden. He's signed up.
Brilliant, I love it. So for those watching this on YouTube, you're all the seeing this here now. We'll make sure they can see that and blow that up. That's awesome. I love it. So in terms of that, then, okay, let's use that as the way it's changed. From let's think about Tom Cartwright, who I remember as a kid. I remember doing some stuff. I can't remember years ago with him, and all the coaches have always have quoted him. Who I've grown up for the years. To seeing what the game is now. Do you think there is? What are some of the issues you maybe see through the pathway with kids coming into like the setup of Glamorgan now? Obviously, you got the old school Tom Cartwright, play straight, don't play that type of thing, which is, I think there's merit potentially in having that. But there's also this new dynamic of like, well, moving the game forward with this. Is there a happy balance, or what are the faults you see that you maybe have to correct with some of the young guns coming through now, or if there are any faults, what do you see coming through at the moment?
Great question. Look, I think we've only recently taken over that pathway from Glamorgan. I've mentioned this for the last 3 years or so. I believe we should get the coaches accredited by Glamorgan. And by doing that, we have to watch them coach. So we have a Glamorgan way. So we put that down on paper, how we want our bowlers, what attributes we're looking for in our quick bowlers and our spin bowlers. What attributes are we looking for in our opening batsmen and our middle order batsmen? Then we put those attributes all together. We put them, give that intro. These are the coaching modules. These are the things that we want. We want under 13s not to be using the trigger. We want the under 13s to be standing still, nice base, working, keep an eye on the bat path, but looking to hit the ball from a strong base. When they become 15, 16, they'll naturally develop a trigger because the bowling is getting quicker, and feel will develop a trigger. It's like tennis players who serve in tennis. You don't need a big trigger when you're facing someone who serves at 60 miles an hour. When they serve at 140 miles an hour, you need a trigger to be able to move.
Yeah.
So the same principle with our young cricketers. We don't want them to see them triggering, because when they go through a growth spurt, that trigger will make them unbalanced at the crease, and they could lose a full season. So we want them still. So we're all these various criteria. We want all our coaches of those age groups to be following the mantra how we want to produce our cricketers, our batsmen and our bowlers. And then we pass that on down. And if we go and witness sessions and time after time, these coaches are not following in this model, they'll be decredited, and would advise kids not to go and use these coaches. Or the other side of the coin, we said, this is a brilliant coach. We really like, he's following our model. We believe this is the way to go. Bang. And, so he becomes an accredited coach. And they have a badge, Glamorgan accredited coach.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of private coaching that goes on. Some of it very good, some of it very good, some of it not so much. So again, if we could get all those, again, and accredit those coaches, the ones that we think, yeah, you're independent, you like to stay independent, that's great. And when we love what you're doing, Des, you're Glamorgan accredited coach, well done. And we've talked about this for a long time, but nothing's been done about it. And it's not about it, it's actually about doing it and getting these processes in place so that we're not missing out on a generation before they start.
Interesting. So obviously there's lots of dads and parents out here listening now, and mums as well listening to this, and even lots of young aspiring cricketers looking to get into the setups of not just Glamorgan but other county clubs around the UK. What's some really solid advice for you to help them set them on their way? I know there's lots of things out there they could be doing, but what are the foundations that you may be looking for to get them into that setup in the first place? What's something that their parents could help their kids do?
Encourage. The biggest thing I think a parent can do is encourage. And if you're not a coach, don't interfere too much. I've seen a number of players, and a couple of those players have gone professional. I'll obviously leave their names out of it, whose careers have been wrecked by their parents. They put too much pressure on them to succeed, and eventually they've walked away from the game, and very sad too.
All sports.
Yeah, and look, it's we want our kids to do well, but sure, we just want our kids to enjoy themselves. And that's the biggest thing in the game. Look, there's a lot of money in cricket. You can earn a heck of a lot of money in cricket these days. But fundamentally, you've got to enjoy the game to get into that level of being able to make some serious money, and you've got to have the talent. Well, I've been fortunate to have a number of people along the way have spots. So mum and dad obviously supported me through my junior cricket. Then they actually dad made a decision that, look, Maynard Bridge cricket now is not go over to Bangor, and he kind of released any kind of, and he'd come and watch me, but he'd leave all Bill to do the coaching and stuff, and I think that's fundamental, very, very important, that you kind of, you support as much as possible, encourage, but not kind of interfere or not push too hard, which is easier said than done, I understand. And talking about coaching, brilliant. I actually had a session which I've managed to message at 4:30 over at Penzance Cricket Club tonight, because our podcast was supposed to finish at 4:30.
I'm so sorry. I just realised the time. I'm so sorry. Well, I tell you what, then we'll literally.
I've put it on. So we've got 10 minutes. If you need 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Perfect. No, I didn't even realise the time. I'm so sorry. Here. So I'll tell you what we'll do very quickly. We'll go a little quick rapid fire questions for some people who've messaged in very quickly. So we'll go for the first one. Right. So Mark Morgan has asked, what's it like working with the Aussie pair and like Maynard? What's it like working with those boys? And Michael?
Brilliant. I mean, Ness, it couldn't be an easier player to work with. He's very clear on his game, whether it's with batting or bowling, knows what he wants to do, knows his body well, and just wants to try and improve kind of year on year by doing his basics better and better and better each time, whether that's with a ball or with a bat. Maynard, on the other hand, he got a theory every net session, a different theory about his batting. He's now obviously bowling off spin this year rather than his leg spin or seamers that he's done in the past. So he's forever changing. And Maynard is great. We have some great debates, Maynard and I. Some people say we argue, but we don't. We have debates about the game. He's highly passionate about the game, loves talking about it, breathes it, lives it, 24/7. Ness is a bit more chilled. He's a bit more relaxed, but Maynard is just like an incredible appetite to try and learn more and develop himself and to become the best player he possibly can. So he can be quite hard working. He can be quite hard working. You think you've got him there. He's had an unbelievable net. He's played brilliantly. And the next net he comes in, he says, "Oh, Matt, I've just thought about changing my grip a little bit." And you just like think, "Whoa."
Brilliant. All right, okay, so next one. James Kayle's asking, best overseas Glamorgan player, past or present, you've ever played or worked with?
Viv, to me, has been the best because he helped transform how we looked at the game and viewed the game as players in the Glamorgan dressing room. He had a huge input of that. Fire in his belly like you can't believe, wanted to prove something, obviously, after what happened at Somerset. Led us to our first ever one-day trophy. Played some incredible innings, taught me a great deal about being there at the end, soaking up the pressure, being there at the end. I was a far better player after the time I'd spent with Viv. Michael Kaspovich was hugely underrated, but a brilliant overseas player for us. And when I came back as coach in, 2008, after finishing with England in 2007, they'd signed a guy called Mark Cosgrove. And Cosy was he's not my type of cricketer. He's massively overweight. He's not brilliantly mobile in the field. Why Glammy keep signing him? And he was signed for the 2008 season already. And I worked with him. I thought, this bloke is an absolute gem. The players loved him. The input he had in the dressing room and on the playing field to develop these younger players that we had coming through and playing this fearless brand of cricket was absolutely terrific. So at the end of 2010, when essentially he was sacked and Captain Jamie Dalrymple was sacked because they signed Alvaro Peterson, that was it. It ruined the whole model of what we've been developing at the club. And so Cosy was a brilliant overseas player for us. as well. And look, these two are right up there as well.
Right. And one last question, very quickly, is like from the public. When a player has a long, this is from Dylan Smith, by the way. When a player has a long form slump, how as a coach do you help lift that player up? 90% of the time, it's a mental thing. 10% technique. But it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts.
Look, it's a really great question. It's so tough because he's right that it's a mental. So people talk a lot about you've got to work harder. You've got to do more. You've got to spend time. So you'll go through that period probably at some stage early on in that fall of form. So where you will spend an extra hour slinging with them on a 1-to-1, and you'll make that sling almost a feel-good practice. It's not soft half volleys because it's not kind of relevant to what he's going to come up with in 2 or 3 days' time in the next match. So you still have it fairly competitive in the net, but you make sure he gets enough bad balls to try and get his form going. You might use a bit of kidology to make him focus on something that he's already doing, but he's doing subconsciously, to take his mind off other things. That might be a footwork thing, to take his mind off. And then the third is to say, you're having a break from the game. So those are the kind of way. So the first one I'd go. The first one is that would be the order I'd go with it as well. And that I'm not, when I say you're taking a break from the game, I'm not saying that you're not playing the next match either. Because I've got to manage the squad, and someone's had 3 bad games, but I know he's a class player. Then I'm still going to give him that 4th game. There was a great phrase I heard a number of years ago. That was. Trevor Bayliss it was when he was England coach, and I caught up with him in London at the Dubious Hotel, and he said, my philosophy is I'd always give a player 1 more game to succeed rather than 1 less game to fail. And nice. it was a really good kind of. I didn't think the Aussies had that kind of level of, but he was a brilliant coach, Bayliss, and it's kind of stuck with me. So. I get quite a bit of stick on social media with sticking with certain players at certain times, but I always try and give a player an extra game rather than a game. I like that.
Cool. And then literally, this is a quick rapid fire one before we talk about the charity work you're doing. Favorite venue for teas in the world?
International. If it's an international match, Lord's is the best. Lord's is fantastic. They put on an unbelievable. It's like Michelin-starred restaurant. Yeah,
brilliant. And then you got.
But in the county game, look, Glammy's way up there. So the work that Claire does for the lads at Glamorgan, we always get highly, commended from the opposition on the food that we do. Leicestershire, actually, where we are later this week, is a pretty good spot for food. I guess Gloucester not so much, Derby not so much, but Leicester's not too bad. So, but in terms of international, and Lord's isn't as good for the county as it is for international. I mean, international, it's unbelievable.
And then finally, one last question from the rapid fire: favorite ground you've ever played at?
Lord's.
Boom, nice. So, Matt, I know you've got to go, and I'm so sorry for keeping you for such a long time today. There's so many things you can go and to hear. Tell us quickly about what's happening in October this year. And I think we have to get you back on actually and talk about this a bit more in depth and how you're training for it.
Later about that, but or another time, most definitely, Bridget. It's a charity walk. I did 2 years ago. I walked the length of Wales and the 3 peaks in Wellies. For the Tom Maynard Trust as a legacy for Tom. And on the back of that walk, we've put in some artificial nets of Glamorgan in Tom's name and a new dressing room for the second and thirds at some Fagans Creek club called Tom's Hut, rather than the old porter cabin that was there. So there's somewhere where players can change now on the second field. So on the back of that, I wanted to recognise the Professional Cricketers Trust for all the support that they've given me and my family over the years, and also the great work that they do. and also Help for Heroes, who again I think are an incredible charity and require a huge amount of funding each year. So in October, I'm walking from John O'Groats to Land's End in Wellies for those two great charities.
Matt, that's awesome. I think we're definitely going to get back onto the show and talk about the walking, because I think the walking has a huge carryover to cricket, and the way you're training, the speeds I've seen you're getting at the moment is phenomenal and put into place. So I think there's a huge thing we can talk about here. But guys, definitely check it out. If you Google Matt Maynard on the interwebs and find out what he's doing in the charity's work, it's a fantastic thing. It's over 1,000 miles he's going to be doing here now, and I think it's a great charity to get involved with. And we wish you all the best from here at Cricket
Thanks,
Management.
Breezy. All the very best.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure and everything here now. If you can hold on for 2 seconds while I press stop on the record, but we'll get you back on soon and we'll chat to you then. Guys, thank you very much for listening. Until next time, take care.